That is when Aurora police officers themselves started to come to me and said, Danielle, it's bigger than this. It's not just the sheer numbers that are here. You need to know who's here. And I said, what does that mean? And they said, there's a Venezuelan prison gang here called Tren de Aragua, and they are actually taking over apartment complexes.
Mile High Minute, #1 blog in the universe. Today, I get the special opportunity to sit down with Aurora City Councilwoman Danielle Jurinsky. I'm sure y'all have seen her all over national news, local news, everywhere. Appreciate you for coming on the show.
Absolutely.
So let's, just give people who may not know, I'm sure most people know if they're here, but just give them a little background as far as where you're from and you're originally born and raised in Aurora?
Yep, I was born right here in Aurora, Colorado, at the hospital on 225 and 6th Avenue, and I've been in Aurora my entire life.
Okay, so pretty much whole upbringing, high school, middle school, everywhere, Aurora.
Everything Aurora.
Okay. And what about like your parents? Were they from Aurora as well, or did they kind of move here, or where are they originally from?
My father is originally from Cleveland, Ohio, and my mother is originally from El Paso, Texas.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So did they meet here? Or
they met on a flight. My mom was a flight attendant.
Oh, okay.
And my dad was a businessman on a business trip, and they met on a flight. And then about a year later, they both ended up in Aurora and happened to live in the same apartment complex.
Oh.
And recognized each other at the mailboxes.
That's random.
Yes.
So like they met on a flight originally, but then came back around a couple years later or something, met again.
Almost a year later. They were checking the mail at the same time. They both had been relocated. My mom had been relocated to the old Stapleton airport, and my dad's company had relocated him out here. They happened to move into the same apartment complex and was checking the mail at the same day at the same time and recognized each other from that flight.
That's random. What a coincidence, right? Let's talk about life before politics. What kind of student were you? Were you playing sports? Like, what were your interests and hobbies and stuff like that growing up?
Sure. When I was a kid, I was in Taekwondo for a while. I played basketball and I played soccer. My mom actually left when I was a kid, so I was raised by my dad. And, in high school, things were a little rough for me, I would say. And after high school, I took off and joined the military, and I did 9 years in the Air Force, 6 of those years as a military police officer. And then 3 years I was in munitions. And then I started in the bar business very, very young. At 24 years old is when I entered the ownership side of the bar business, but I was bartending before that. And then since then, I've been self-employed ever since, owning multiple bars. Okay, so a lot of interests and a lot of very wide spectrum. Did you play basketball, and what was the other sport you said? Soccer.
In high school as well, or?
High school.
High school. At Overland, correct? Did you only go to Overland?
I only went to Overland.
Graduated from there? What was that experience like as far as Overland? I know when I was in high school, they had a really good basketball team, good football.
I loved going to Overland. Overland is a very diverse school. Overland, none of us really had anything. There was, there were groups that were considered to be the rich kids, but even that, compared to schools like Cherry Creek or Eagle Crest or Grandview or whatever, everybody was just came from families that, were either broken homes, single family homes. Everybody was just kind of equal. And skin color didn't matter. Nothing mattered. We were all very, very close. And with our administrative staff, even, our former principal, and may he rest in peace, he's no longer with us, and he took off and went into politics actually before he passed away, but Mr. Buckner, really was an icon and a huge part in shaping me into the person I am today.
Yeah, okay. And then you brought up that your mom may have left at some point. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, my mom, first and foremost, my mom means well. She is a very good person, but I think she herself came from a pretty tough background, and she struggled with alcohol a lot, and that started turning into some abuse. She was arrested for DUI. She, did jail time, just different things. And my mom really started going down a path that wasn't good, and it wasn't healthy, and it wasn't healthy for her or for me or for my dad. And she, after one time of some very, very bad abuse that took place, she left. She moved back to Texas when I was a kid, because that's where her parents, my grandparents, were.
After that, were you still able to reconnect at times, or what was the relationship like after that?
Very strained. It took some time. I would say that my grandfather was a big part of being the glue in maintaining any kind of relationship. I'm an only child. My mom is also an only child, so it's not like we have a big family. I have no cousins. I don't have aunts and uncles. Like I said, I think my grandparents played a pivotal role in trying to maintain that relationship. And now, today at 4 years old, my mom is also that much older. And she, when I had my son, who's 5, he's going on 6, when I called and told her that I was pregnant and that I was having a child, she was very excited. And I think she saw that as her second chance. And she is amazing with my son. And so I have allowed that relationship to happen. And her and I, we talk about once a month now, but my dad is certainly my rock.
He's always been there.
I have Daddy's Girl tattooed on my arm. But my mom, both of my grandparents have since passed away. So really, for my mom, her only living relatives are myself and my son. I think aging does something to a person. And my mom certainly today is not who she was when I was a child.
I know it's might be tough to talk about, but I feel like those things kind of important to connect to an audience and stuff like that. Okay, so now, you graduate from Overland, boom, and then you ended up going into the Air Force, correct? You want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure.
Military/Air Force.
Sure. When I got out of the military, when I graduated high school, I was 17.
Okay.
I didn't turn 18 until August. I didn't graduate early. I just was one of the youngest for my grades, for the grade I was in. We graduated in May, and my birthday isn't until August. So I was 17 when I graduated, and after I graduated high school, I started working, and I was 19 when I made the decision to go into the military. I was attending the Community College of Aurora, but back then I had some struggles, right? And I had been placed on academic probation at the Community College of Aurora, and quite frankly, my dad didn't have any money for me to even be going to college. So I saw the military as an opportunity to accomplish several things: get some discipline, get some focus, serve my country. It was shortly after the attacks of 9/11. I never had medical insurance as a child, so this was the first time I ever had medical insurance or dental insurance, was when I joined the military, and then get some money for college. So I joined when I was 19, and I went in as security forces, which is military police. And I did 6 years security forces, and then I did 3 years in munitions. So ultimately I did 9 years. I was in the Air National Guard, but this was during the peak of the war. So
the Afghanistan war?
Operation Iraqi Freedom. So anybody who had joined Guard or Reserves at that time, you did a lot of active duty time. We were at war. So I did my 9 years, but I had started a civilian life. I had started opening bars, and I had a whole civilian life going on. And after 9 years, I decided, I also dealt with some medical injuries. And I just decided at that point that it was probably best for me to just go into the civilian world.
Yeah. Okay. I wanted to ask about, like you said, was as far as school goes too. You said it was like a struggle as far as like academic probation, stuff like that. Was it just dealing with like a whole bunch of stuff at that time, or what was kind of the struggle with school at that time?
Yeah, I think it started, obviously what I dealt with in my childhood, with my mom and different things. And then being a young girl, mostly growing up without my mom, that created its own issues, right? Naturally. And so, I had some behavioral issues in high school. I had some behavioral issues in high school, but like I said, Mr. Buckner really was my rock, the principal of Overland High School while I was there. And when I graduated high school, the party continued, the party continued. I sometimes didn't go to class or, so my grades really suffered at Community College of Aurora, and I was placed on academic probation. And I just kind of hit a point where I realized that I wanted better for myself in life, and I found the military to be an option. I've always been fairly patriotic, loved my country. 9/11 happened when I was a senior in high school, and that was a huge driving force for me to want to serve my country. And then all of the added benefits, right, of getting money for college, getting medical insurance, getting dental insurance, which I never had. I had never had.
Was the FAFSA around back then, or was that just not really available?
FAFSA was around, but it didn't. It wasn't as advanced as it is now. I don't think it was as funded as it is now.
It wasn't as easy to obtain.
It was not easy to obtain.
Like nowadays.
And in fact, now I believe, as long as your application is in, you can start school knowing that like the FAFSA payments are coming. I think back then, if I remember correctly, you still had to pay up front, and it was like a reimbursement. Wow. And if you can't pay up front, what are you supposed to do?
Right.
So I found a lot of benefits for wanting to go and join the military.
What's maybe like one or two gems you really picked up from being in the military? And real quick too, I know it's kind of like a side question, but you brought up 9/11 in high school. I feel like nowadays it's like hard to be patriotic, to be honest. So like, what was kind of the difference from then to now? Because I'm sure that made like it a lot easier to be patriotic, and nowadays it's like you can't even really like be a proud American without people being like, oh, you're racist or you're this,
That's right. I always tell people that the most patriotic that this country has ever been is September 12th, 2001. That is the most patriotic day of this country in its entirety. Because that day, this country became one. This country sold out of American flags. You could not buy an American flag. They could not make them fast enough. There was an American flag hanging on every house in this country. It also was a different day. The Democratic Party was a different party than it is now. And Americans became one. That was the most horrific attack we had seen ever on American soil. More horrific than Pearl Harbor. And,
Have you went to the New York and like visited the memorial or anything?
I went to New York before the attack. So I remember seeing the Twin Towers.
Yeah.
I've been back to New York since, but I haven't had a chance to go to the memorial. I have visited Pearl Harbor, but it, you know, I try to explain to younger generations.
I was like 3 when that happened.
Right,
so I don't remember.
right.
But I know when I was young, it was just easier in general to be patriotic.
That's right. I mean, you know, we had a President Bush came out immediately, you know, and said, we're coming for you, you know, and you saw strength. You saw strength in politics when that happened. And, you know, I personally, I mean, I was a senior in high school, and I remember that morning, and I sat on the couch with my dad. I was in the shower, and I was listening to the radio, and the radio talk show hosts were talking about it, and I'm thinking to myself, what is going on? What is going on? And I grabbed a towel, and I got out of the shower, and I ran to the landing, and I said, Dad, are we at war? What's going on? Well, this is back when people still read the paper, right? So my dad's sitting downstairs eating a bowl of cereal, and he's reading the paper. And he's like, no, I'm reading the paper. Yeah. Well, the paper was printed the night before.
Right.
So I go and I get back in the shower, and next thing I know, the radio talk show hosts are crying. The second plane has just hit the North Tower. We are under attack. America is under attack. I shut the water off. I grab a robe. I come running downstairs. I said, Dad, we're at war. We are under attack. I said, turn on the news. And I sat there, my dad and I, and my dad is a former Marine, and just cried. Didn't know anybody involved.
Right, but you can
just feeling that pain of being an American, and also very unknown. Every 5 minutes, another plane hit.
Yeah.
Hit the Pentagon. Hit the towers.
Yeah, you don't know if it's going to what cities it's going to go hit.
We were under attack. We were under attack as Americans. And, they grounded all flights. And I remember I was probably about an hour late to school that morning. And I got to school, Overland High School, senior year, and everyone was crying.
Right, yeah.
Everyone was crying. And these are teenagers,
Probably just couldn't even have a normal school day at all at that point. Yeah.
Some folks had family in New York that they hadn't been able to get a hold of yet because all cell phone towers were down, I will never, and cell phones weren't huge yet.
Then, yeah.
They were out, but it was the big brick Nokia phones, and not everybody had them. But like landlines were down, and I just remember so much unity. And if you were to take a high school today versus when I was in high school, right? At that time, being a senior, freshman, sophomore, juniors, and seniors, the day 9/11 happened. If you were to take that demographic and compare it to the demographic of students today in 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, an attack like that was to happen on American soil, I don't know that you would get the same reaction.
Right.
I think this country has changed so much. Like you said, it's not just hard, but sometimes scary.
Right.
To say that you're proud to be an American.
Right. Yeah.
That you're proud of this country, that you're proud of your beliefs, that you would stand up, that you would go and fight for this country if you had to.
Right.
It has a stigma now.
Yeah.
And it didn't then.
Right.
Because then everybody was ready to go and fight. Everybody.
Right.
They could not enlist people fast enough. They could not enlist people fast enough. Everybody wanted to go fight for this country. You wouldn't see that today, would be my guess. Right. You just wouldn't see that today.
Yeah, I mean, I just generally speaking, like, I feel like no country's perfect. Every country has its flaws and stuff, but like, I'll never not be proud to be American. But like you said, it's just so hard, like nowadays, to say it because it's like you said, there's just going to be some sort of stigmatism or assumptions.
You'll offend somebody.
Yeah, yeah. What was like one gem you picked up from the Air Force or the military after dealing with all that and stuff like that?
I think for me, it would be mental fortitude. I joined the military in 2004, so 21 years ago. And I joined a very male-dominated career field.
Right.
In fact, I enlisted Marine Corps because I wanted to be just like my daddy. And the Marines were pushing me to go open general, and they wouldn't give me the career I wanted, which was to be a military police officer. They were pushing me to go open general. Well, anybody who's in the military knows, being pushed to go open general as a woman at that time, it would have ended up being in an admin position, a nurse, a cook, something like that.
Right.
So I ended up having to switch, even though I enlisted Marine Corps. I switched over to the Air Force because they let me enlist security forces. But a very male-dominated career field. And
mental toughness from that.
Very much so. I was with the group, with the military police academy that I went through. And we started with roughly 120 in my class. And we started with about 20 women out of that 120. And out of that 20 women, I was only one of two women that were feminine. And we weren't really wanted there.
Yeah.
So I would say mental fortitude, and that has brought me so far in every aspect of my life, because owning bars is a male-dominated career field.
Right, yeah.
It's mostly men that own bars, right? Politics is very much a man's world. So being a woman, that mental toughness, that mental fortitude, it has carried me a long way.
That's good. Okay. Have you seen any like the conspiracy theories about 9/11? Do you have any like quick thoughts on that, or?
I've seen them.
Yeah.
I don't believe any of that. I believe that very, very bad people who are still the very, very bad people today that want to kill Americans, and that want to kill Jews. We were attacked.
Right.
I mean, we were attacked. There was no inside job here. I mean, we were absolutely attacked.
Okay, thank you. Just because I feel like, especially that conspiracy is just so like long and so many people believe it, so I'm glad you.
Well, and the thing is the further you get away from a situation, more and more people forget.
Right.
More and more people get older that didn't know about it, right? So, you hear conspiracy theories about all kinds of things. Did we land on the moon?
I'm sure people have made some about you. I've heard some about me. So.
I mean, it just, I've heard them all, but I know I watched 9/11 happen real time. There was no conspiracy behind that. It was evil. It was pure evil and pure hatred.
Yeah, I know you talked about owning the bar and stuff like that, which is JJ's, right?
That's one of them.
One of them, okay. But then when did the political sphere interest you, and like when did you start getting into politics and, get to where you are today?
Sure. Well, it was in 2020. Okay. I owned 4 locations at that time, and the pandemic happened, and all of my businesses were shut down, out of my control. Yeah. But I was watching every other kind of business packed to the gills.
Yeah.
Walmart, you name it, pot shops got to stay open,
Right.
you know, but bars and restaurants couldn't. And we had plenty of room to space people out. I think that was the first time that I really felt like the government treaded on me.
Mm-hmm.
I know that sounds cliche to say, but
Don't tread on me.
don't tread on me.
Yeah.
Don't tread on me.
Yeah.
And they did. And that really woke me up. The handling of the pandemic is what first sort of opened my eyes to everything. Then here specifically in Aurora, what they called the Summer of Love, after George Floyd was killed, the riots that took place, it was crazy.
Yeah.
And there was not one arrest made. And meanwhile, my businesses were still shut down.
Yeah.
But thousands of people were allowed to gather and commit crimes and shut down our highway and try to defund our police. And my wheels started spinning even more.
Mm-hmm.
What is going on in this country right now? What is happening? And then part of the final straw was going into the second shutdown of 2020 for bars and restaurants, because we were shut down twice.
Right, yeah.
Going into the second shutdown, the Aurora City Council brought forward a $20 an hour minimum wage increase, specifically for Aurora, while my businesses were shut down. And I think for me, that's when the hammer dropped. And I said, I have to get involved. I have got to get involved. No more sitting on the sidelines.
Mm-hmm.
No more waiting for the government to tell me when I can reopen. I've got to get in this fight. And to be honest with you, I didn't even really know what the city council was. So I had to look into that. But I realized they had the power to raise the minimum wage while my businesses were closed. So I decided that that was it. And I was going to enter the political arena. And I ran as an outsider, as a total outsider, because I'm not a politician. I've proven that time and time again. I can't manage to stay out of the media. So I have managed that several times now to prove that I'm not a politician. I don't know that I ever will be, but I ran and I won, and I have ferociously stood up for public safety, defended our police officers when they deserve to be defended. I have also criticized police officers.
I noticed that in that interview too.
I have criticized police officers, and I get zero credit for that. But I have stood up to police officers that I felt have been wrong in situations. And I have ferociously stood up for business in Aurora.
Right.
Being a business owner myself and going through that entire year of 2020, like I said, I realized I needed to have a seat at the table and have a voice. And I have had that voice and carried that voice loudly my entire 3.5 years in office.
Talking about that race too, so you got over 26,000 votes. The next closest was like 23,726. So, I mean, comparatively, it's a pretty decent sized margin. It kind of happened quickly. Like, how were you able to, being that you weren't in politics at the time, like, how were you able to gravitate an audience, so quickly? And like, was it the stuff you were running on that you think really gravitated towards people, or like what kind of worked for you?
Yeah, it was partially my platform. Given the anti-business climate, the anti-police climate, the pro-crime climate, my platform, I think, was very appealing to the people of Aurora. At the time, 2 of the 4 bar and restaurants that I owned are in Aurora. So naturally, I know a lot of people, and I'm a native. I've been here my whole life. I went to the Community College of Aurora. I served 6 of my 9 years at Buckley, now Space Force Base. I've been here a long time. I know a lot of people. And I think that I had a natural built-in support.
That's awesome. Okay. And real quick too, you did end up graduating from Aurora Community College in 2023, correct? Or you got an associate's degree?
24.
Okay, 24. You want I think the thing I read was that you were there during 2023 maybe, but
I went,
Okay.
it was the fall semester of 2023,
Okay.
but the graduation wasn't until May of 2024.
Okay.
The only reason I went back and did, and there's a whole article about this, but that was a promise that I made to my dad that I would obtain a college degree. And I am a first generation college graduate because of that. And that is a promise that I had made to my dad when I was younger, that no matter how troubled I was, no matter all the nonsense I was getting into, that I would one day get a college degree. So I went back and I made good on that word. And I did have to do a semester of college at Community College of Aurora.
Was it in person or online? Or?
No, it was in person.
I'm
a little old school, 40 years old. I had to go in person, and I had to be there. But I went, and I went during the day because that was most conducive for my schedule. So I was surrounded by 18-year-olds who had just graduated high school. In fact, a couple of them I helped register to vote.
Okay.
But I went, and it was a great experience for me, and my dad got to watch me graduate college.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm finishing up at Metro right now, and like even I feel that to a certain extent because I'm like 27 around a bunch of like 19, 20-year-olds, and they're like finishing their degrees, and I'm like,
yeah.
I can tell I'm a little older. It works to your benefit in some ways.
Sure.
Sure. It's interesting. I pretty much just wanted your life story before we got into like all the media stuff. But what's like the average day in the life for you as a council city woman, and like how do you deal with running like JJs and everything? And you were a realtor too.
Yeah.
As well. So how do you kind of juggle everything? And what's the average day in the life as like Aurora City Councilwoman?
There's no average day, I'll tell you that. No 2 days are the same. One consistent is working out, going to the gym, and that's for my mental health.
Gotcha.
It's kind of whatever comes along. It could be an interview, it could be a meeting, it could be going to a constituent's house, to address concerns. It could be phone call back and forth with another, real estate agent, working on a deal, typing up a contract. I do a lot of work off my phone. I swing by the bars. I go by a few times a week, and I get my inventory done and my ordering. But when it comes to the bars, I am blessed to have the best, most loyal staff on the planet. I wouldn't be able to do anything that I do without my dad and my stepmom. So that's really what it comes down to. I have a 5-year-old son. I'm a single mom. My parents help me a lot, but like I said, no 2 days are the same. And for me, I have to be able to just roll with the punches. When I won my election in 21, I did sell 2 of my 4 locations, one in 2022 and then one in 2023. It's just time management. You see, I get busy, my phone doesn't stop, I get held up in meetings. I do my best, and I just keep going.
So a couple days ago, there was a attack in Boulder. Do you want to talk about that? I know it probably hits a little more home with you because you are Jewish, right? So do you want to talk about that, give your opinion on that a little bit?
It does hit close to home. And what people aren't realizing is that Jewish people make up 2% of the entire world's population. And yet we are the target of the most hate crimes. And it saddens me that there are so many elected officials in this state at the state level who are Jewish, who I believe, in my opinion, run things through a political lens first and then a religious lens second. I hope to see that change. I think it is changing. I think this was really jarring for some of them, but that incident in Boulder, first of all, it further highlights the anti-Semitism in this country, in the world, really. But second, it highlights the broken immigration system that was allowed under the previous administration for 4 years. And it highlights what has happened in this state with Democrats doubling and tripling down, defending people like Solomon. Why did he have a driver's license?
Yeah.
Jared Polis. Why did he have a driver's license? Why are these migrants being given more benefits and more priority than Americans who are here? You know, Denver, the city of Denver is facing a $256 million deficit in their budget. And it is solely because of the amount of money that they have taken to fund the illegals and the homeless. Now, we do have an obligation to help the homeless.
Right.
We do have an obligation as Americans to help folks with mental health disorders. But one thing that this state did, and I'm old enough to remember this, we used to have state mental health hospitals. There was one out at Fort Logan. They shut them down. Why? That's where these folks should go.
Yeah.
Democrats argue for housing first policies. Well, you can't put somebody with a severe mental health disorder toppled with drug addictions, alcohol addictions, whatever kind of addictions, prostitution going on as a way of living. Yeah. You can't just take this person and put them in a house and say, we're solving homelessness. You're not. You're not at all. And you're not helping that person because that person doesn't know how to cope. I just think being here my whole life and being a native and remembering when this state was a red state, it is sad. Yeah. It's sad to see the decline. It's almost unrecognizable.
It's changed a lot.
It has changed so much. We had mental health hospitals where, you know, these folks would go and receive treatment because I believe, right, that these folks should be receiving treatment before they're receiving housing.
Yeah.
And receiving treatment in a hospital, that's housing also. But so many things have changed in this state, and it really is almost unrecognizable to me.
Do you feel like that's almost, I guess, bringing the housing for the homeless, stuff like that, almost kind of, I'm missing words for it, but just gives them more opportunity to do what they're doing that has put them in the homeless situation in the first place?
Well, sure.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, it absolutely enables them.
Enables was the word I was looking for.
Yep, it absolutely enables them. But then what this state has done is this state has created so many tenants' rights and squatters' rights, essentially anti-landlord rights, where folks just aren't paying rent at all, and it takes up to a year to get them evicted from your property. And they're doing damage to your property, or doing all kinds of things. And what is that landlord going to do? That landlord can come back and sue them, but you can't squeeze blood out of a turnip, right? And so the changes in this state have just become so progressive. In my opinion, the Democratic Party in this state has died, and it doesn't exist. And I remember when the Democratic Party was a great party, but I don't believe it exists in this state. I believe that this state has been overrun by activists and progressives.
So like a far left, more far left party.
Fringe, yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I did see something on your XP, I think it was from U.S. National News or something, that said Colorado was ranked the second most dangerous state, which that was crazy because I remember at one point it was like, oh, all these great cities are here, and then to see that, I was like, well, what's going on?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. But when you allow a 15-year-old illegal going 90 miles an hour in a 45 to kill beautiful Caitlin Weaver, 24 years old, Aurora resident, and you give this 15-year-old illegal 3 years probation,
that's wild. You
have made crime legal. You've made it legal. What is probation?
No repercussions.
You're gonna monitor this person for, that's not a punishment. You have made murder legal. in this state when sentences like that are being handed out, and they're being handed out left and right.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I'm even shocked to see that we're second in the nation for crime.
I also seen that you had reposted something about crime being down in Aurora.
In Aurora.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Overall, crime in Aurora is down 22% currently, which is huge. The crime rate is still too high for me, but it's down and we're trending down. We have a strong police chief in command at the helm right now. Morale of the police department is being rebuilt. We have put policies in place that have helped with that. Mandatory minimum jail sentences. The pursuit policy is back in place. Police will chase you if you have committed a crime. I am very, very proud. You know, I have been on this council. I'm into my 4th year. My first year on this council, I served as the vice chair of the Public Safety Committee. In the past 3 years, I have served as the chair of the Public Safety Committee. So the crime rate being down in Aurora, I take great pride in that. I also take it very, very personally, the death of Caitlin Weaver. Like I said, a young 24-year-old, beautiful woman who was driving home from work. Her boyfriend was at home waiting for her. And a 15-year-old illegal immigrant with small children in the car with him hit her at 90 miles per hour in a 45 zone, and she was killed instantly.
This just happened, or when did God? Honestly,
it happened last summer.
Last summer, okay.
Which
is obviously when things started getting pretty big with that.
The sentencing was just about 3 weeks ago.
Okay.
I spoke to Caitlin Weaver's father, and I vowed to him that this isn't over.
Yeah.
This is not over. I will do everything in my power to protect the people of Aurora. I have proven that multiple times. I've even put myself in scary situations going into these apartment complexes where the Venezuelan gangs were at to try and protect people. So I have proven that under my watch, I take the safety of the people of Aurora very seriously.
Right, yeah. And yeah, I mean, you going out there, you know, boots on the ground shows like how serious you are. I feel like most, you know, people involved with politics probably wouldn't do that. So I respect that. I commend that.
Thank you.
I did want to bring up Elijah McClain a little bit. I feel like obviously everyone in Aurora knows what happened. That was a huge thing back in like 2020.
He was killed in 2019. 2019. It was 2020 that those officers were indicted.
Yeah. I guess what can you say for like the residents of Aurora, you know, what has changed since then? Because obviously that whole situation, I feel like made a lot of people not trust the police department and stuff like that. So has a lot changed since then from your perspective? Do you want to break that down a little bit?
You know, I mean, first and foremost, Elijah McClain should be alive today. Right. And this young man had no criminal record, probably didn't even have any type of violent bone in his body. And when you talk about an absolute tragedy, that is the definition of Elijah McClain. Yeah. You know, and I think that there's a lot of learning that came out of that. You know, Elijah McClain had different health issues, which is, you know, why he was wearing a ski mask and a hoodie on a hot summer night. But he had health issues, you know, and he was always cold, and that entire situation is such a tragedy. And in those officers, regardless of what some say, I believe those officers and those firefighters will live with this for the rest of their life. And I believe it haunts them.
Oh, I'm sure.
You know, I think that since then, and there's no denying it. I mean, a jury found that one police officer and 2 firefighters murdered him.
Right. And then the photos and everything.
It's not up for debate. Yeah. He was murdered. It is not up for debate. I think since then, there are some groups. You heard me talk about a group on the show that I was on, The Road Called Straight. This nonprofit does a lot to work with the youth in Aurora and the Aurora Police Department, and to bridge that gap and to bring them together. And they invite the police to a lot of their events. I think there is great work being done to bring the community back together. I think we have a fantastic police chief now, you know, but he also, he won't pander to the activists. You know, if an officer is wrong, he will say they're wrong. I will say they're wrong. There's plenty of us that are ready and willing to hold officers accountable for their behavior. But at the same time,
not all cops are bad.
That's right. And
just threw my 2 cents in there.
And that's the truth. And they're necessary.
I
mean, as a woman who's not very big,
who are you gonna call?
I mean, you could pick me up and walk off with me.
Right.
I mean, we have to have police. So we have to have this foundation. We have to have this communication, this level of understanding and trust. And it just seems like some of these activist groups, they have made this their platform, and that's how they gain followers. And they don't care what the facts are in any case, to include the Kylan Lewis situation, which, like I said, that officer was cleared all the way through a grand jury. The 3 police officers and the 2 firefighters, it went through the same process, a grand jury. They were indicted. All 5 of them were indicted. Now, 2 police officers were found not guilty, but Officer Michael Deek in the Kylan Lewis situation, a grand jury cleared him. At that point, there is nothing else, at least criminally, that can be done to or against this officer. Now, the family has filed a civil suit, and so we'll see where that goes. If it is decided that the city is to be held civilly liable. But there is just this group of activists that have started to take over in several spaces that just hate the cops, no matter what. They are teaching minorities to be scared of the cops. It's sad. We have data that shows, as part of the consent decree that we're under, we have data that shows the areas of Aurora that the most 911 calls come from are minority areas. That's the highest number of 911 calls coming from the city.
To go off your point, I feel like when I was younger and I used to, you know, get a little trouble, nothing crazy, but just, you know, being a kid, I would be like kind of more afraid of cops and like be like, oh, I don't want to be around. But that's because I was doing dumb stuff. Now that I'm older, I'm like, I actually feel more safe around cops a lot of times because I'm like, okay, if something were to happen, you know?
Well, that's right.
And even with like my hip hop blog, at first I was like young and it's like, oh, I know like there's probably a lot of people that may feel this type of way about my blog or this, that, and third. But then like as I got older, like there's been sometimes I'll be at an event and I'm like, you know, there's a security guard that's a cop and I'm like, you know, making friends with him, like just because, you know, I feel safe. And he don't even have to be white. He could be any color.
That's
you know?
right.
But
that's right.
But yeah, I agree. I think everyone, you know, I think you can agree that everyone can agree that like Elijah McClain should be here, and what happened shouldn't have happened, and
it's,
you know,
it's absolutely tragic. But one thing that I think is so tragic too is you know, and what's not talked about is that 7-Eleven clerk is the one who called 911 and reported Elijah McClain as suspicious because that location had been robbed multiple times.
Which one was it? Which 7-Eleven was it?
Northwest Aurora.
Okay.
I can't remember the exact streets right now, but
probably near Colfax.
Not a good part of town. And they had been robbed several times. And this store clerk sees a man walking towards the store in a black ski mask, a black hoodie, and black sweatpants, and calls 911 for suspicious activity. Elijah McClain comes in to the gas station, grabs a couple of iced teas. He goes up to the counter, he pays for them, and he leaves. That 911 clerk never called back to say, hey, I called, but everything was okay. That clerk never called back. Now, That's not a crime. But I think society also needs to do a better job. There could be so many what if scenarios that night, right? And what if this was done differently? And what if that was done differently? And, I'm sure that store clerk has to live with that for the rest of his life, because he could have called back and said, hey, I don't know, it was kind of weird. Yeah. It's a hot summer night. But this young man came in and bought a couple of iced tea. There's no issues at all. But that clerk also never called back. Elijah McClain should be here.
And I think everyone can agree, finish the point. He should be here, and what happened was wrong. Those specific police officers were rightfully charged. But at the same time, nothing to do with that case, but I do think, the whole every cop is bad is kind of a crazy idea in my opinion.
Well, and even if you break down the Elijah McClain situation, everybody to this day only talks about the police. 2 out of the 3 police officers were found not guilty of anything. Found completely not guilty. Yeah. And to this day, only the police are talked about in the Elijah McClain situation.
I think what made that situation worse too was the photos and everything. I think that.
Yeah.
But I feel like we don't need to get too deep into that stuff. I did want to get into the legal immigration stuff. Obviously, that's when you kind of got brought to the forefront of the media and everything. So the initial one was the gathering in Aurora for the presidential race. Do you want to talk about that a little bit, or I don't know? I feel like you've kind of covered it a lot. So
I have, but if you want me to talk about it for your listeners, I'm happy to.
Yeah, if just briefly want to give your opinion on that, because I feel like that was last summer. I want to say close to the beginning of summer.
Yes.
And I feel like that's kind of when people start to realize oh, this is not normal. This is getting pretty big and out of hand. So.
And nobody would report on it but me.
Yeah.
And I'm not a reporter.
Right. I do remember. Yeah, you posted on Facebook. I think it was.
Oh yeah.
It went crazy. I posted what you posted, but it was already old.
I know. I've had myself, in the midst of little old me. I
respect how outspoken you are about it, though.
Well, thank you. So what really first caught my attention about the immigration situation was I got a phone call one day, and my cook and his husband and their service dog were sitting in their car at what had been their home for almost 2 years, an extended stay motel off of Mississippi and Abilene. And they were by no means homeless. A lot of folks who, either have credit issues, problems coming up with a deposit and first month's rent to get an apartment. They live in extended stay hotels that have kitchens, stuff like that. So this had been their home for almost 2 years, and I got a phone call from him, and he was sitting in his car, and him and his husband were crying, and they said, Danielle, we've just been thrown out of our room. And I said, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, there's buses, they're busing the illegals in. And my cook is Hispanic himself. And so he speaks Spanish, and he started talking to some of them, getting off these buses and asking them who they were, where they were from. And they said that, they were from El Salvador, they were from Venezuela, they were from Colombia, wherever. And I told my cook, I said, go over. I said, do you see buses? And he said, yeah. I said, go over and take pictures of the buses. He sends me pictures of the buses, Denver County Sheriff's Department. So Denver started busing the illegals into Aurora. And I'm the one who found out. Yeah. Only because I had a cook and his family living there.
Yeah.
So that's Mike Johnson's worst nightmare, was for me to find this out. That's what first caught my attention. And I started making noise about it.
Real quick on the bus thing, I thought it was not real when I heard it, but no, that is so real. That was real. That was happening for sure.
It is real.
They were getting bused here for sure.
It is real. Yeah. In the middle of the night. Just dropped off.
Yeah.
Then the mass gathering happened.
Right.
In June of 2024, last year. And I couldn't believe it. How do 5,000 people gather in a shopping center in under an hour
Yeah.
Totally undetected by law enforcement.
It was wild. I seen the footage too. Like fireworks, gunshots, like trash everywhere. It's just, yeah, there was a lot going on.
Yeah. And people trapped in their cars. People who were at Target, who were at Kohl's. I mean, it was a Sunday.
Yeah.
People were out with their kids shopping. I mean, they came in from so cars that were in the parking spaces. Well, all these cars came in and took over the whole shop. People couldn't even get their cars out. I mean, people were literally trapped. Took off, started walking home, left their cars. I mean, that's when, for me, it really started to escalate. And I said, we have a huge problem here.
Right.
We have a big problem here. That's when I started becoming very vocal. And that's when there was this kind of like tug of war between that interim police chief at the time, who is no longer here. This is one of the reasons. Between that interim police chief and myself is because there was a lot of crime committed at that mass gathering. And that interim police chief wanted to make everybody believe that this was a peaceful gathering and they were just celebrating the Venezuelan presidential election.
I think both can be true to a certain extent. Like,
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Maybe some people were there in peace, but you still can't come in and trap people in their cars, and you can't just show up at a shopping center that's open for business.
And and like
I mean,
gunshots and all that.
Yeah, that's not how we celebrate here in America. That's not how we celebrate. We don't shoot guns off into the air to celebrate. It was after that, and I was the only one reporting on it, me. That is when Aurora police officers themselves started to come to me and said, Danielle, it's bigger than this. It's not just the sheer numbers that are here.
And they probably know for sure because they're firsthand seeing.
That's right.
Yeah.
And they said, it's not just the sheer numbers that are here. You need to know who's here. And I said, what does that mean?
Yeah.
And they said, there's a Venezuelan prison gang here called Tren de Aragua.
Yeah.
And they are actually taking over apartment complexes. So it was after that mass gathering that I first heard about this gang. That's when it really started escalating to a whole new level for me.
And then you even had that North Denver like jewelry store heist and
There was one in Boulder. There was one in Boulder.
That happened, and then obviously the one that like that was like locally popular, I feel like, or local news. But then obviously the national news came in when the video of the AR with Cindy Romero, Edward Romero, that video they had on their door.
Yeah.
And then the AR, and like that one kind of blew everyone's mind across the world. I was seeing like every blog platform posting it everywhere.
Yeah.
Fox News, it didn't matter. Everybody.
And that's when I went in and moved the Romeros out.
Yeah.
Because the police were still denying that there was a problem at these apartment complexes.
Yeah. Do you want to just break down that time period a little bit? How it went from, okay, you're kind of figuring this stuff out, talking to some of the Aurora police, and then all of a sudden now it's like just this huge national issue. And the video, like how that came about and how it ended up getting posted.
Yeah. Because there's a big misconception about that video.
Yeah.
So after the mass gathering and police officers started coming to me and saying, Danielle, you need to know who's here. You need to know what's actually going on. And that apartment complexes in this city are being taken over. And there's apartment complexes that we have been told that we either can't respond to at all, or we have to respond to with at least 4 officers in an armored vehicle.
They were told by like police chief, or who were they told?
It was gone out. These were part of the internal emails that I started releasing on social media.
For a second I thought it was like maybe the gang was telling them like
no, the department. Yeah. All while the department was denying that there was any issues going on in these complexes. And they were only talking about...
Because they don't want it to be national news at that time.
They were only talking about code enforcement violations. I really start looking into this, and I start driving by these apartment complexes, and I start... I started driving by... Well, I drove by the edge of Lowry on 12th and Dallas, which is where the Romeros lived.
Right.
And I didn't know them at the time. But I drove by and I thought, I got to see what's going on for myself. I believe in the Second Amendment. I have a concealed carry permit. I carry a gun, and most times. So I thought, I'm just going to go over there and see what's going on.
I did the same thing. I drove by at one point to see what's going on.
Well, I pull up. The parking lot was filled with broken down vehicles, glass, no license plate, but glass all over the place. Yeah. So I thought, well, I'll just park over here, kind of across the street, and I'll get out and walk. I park my car, and I get out, and I maybe make it 2 steps in the direction of the apartment complex, and I hear an alert whistle. And I knew it was an alert whistle. I know the difference between a cat call whistle and an alert whistle. This was an alert whistle.
What was it like? I mean, maybe you can't do it.
I can't. It was a high-pitched, just like a siren. I mean, it almost sounded like a siren. And I turn around, and at the corner, there's a teenage kid posted there, staring at me.
Kind of just watching.
And he's the one that did the whistle.
Yeah.
And I no sooner turn back around, and I see a whole bunch of folks walking out of the Edge at Lowry apartment complex, staring at me.
Yeah, that's intimidating for sure.
Very intimidating. Yeah. And all military-aged young men wearing Chicago Bulls jerseys, everything that the police had told me that were identifying factors of Tren de Aragua is what I saw. And there was a lot of them. And I turned right around, I got right back in my car, and I took off.
And you probably did the same thing.
I took right off. But I continued to be vocal on social media. And I continued to start releasing internal emails that I had obtained. And I kept speaking out about it. One day I get a phone call from Vicente Arenas from Fox 31 News, an actual reporter.
I ran into him. That's random.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I get a phone call from Vicente Arenas, and this is where the misconception comes in.
Yeah.
But he calls me and he says, Danielle, what are you doing right now? And I said, nothing. And I'm already getting attacked. You know, people are saying I'm making this up and I'm attacking peaceful migrants. And so this is when it was on. He says, I got to meet with you. And I said, Vicente, what story are you working on? I said, I'm tired. I'm emotionally drained.
Yeah.
You know, what story are you working on? And he said, well, it's about these apartment complexes that you're talking about. He said, but I have to meet with you. I have to meet you in person. And I said, okay, well, let's meet at the library by my house. So I go and I meet him. And so he and I are talking. He asks a couple questions and blah, blah, blah. And then he says, well, I have something to show you. He showed me that video. That's the misconception.
Okay.
People have said that
You broke it, but...
that I put that video footage out to gain attention and this and that. The media already had that video footage. And the reason Vicente already had that video footage is because the Romeros got so sick and tired of calling 911 hundreds of times and the cops weren't coming, they started calling news tip lines. So the media already had the video footage. So Vicente shows me this video footage and I'm like, what is that? And he said, it's one of the apartment complexes that you keep talking about. And I said, oh my gosh. And he said, it gets worse. I said, how's it get worse? And he said, Danielle, there's Americans trapped in this apartment complex. Because the Sunday night before, there was that massive 80-round shootout.
I did an interview with someone who heard that and talked about that. Yeah.
The Sunday night before, Vicente reached out to me. There was that massive 80-round shootout. Left one Venezuelan man dead in the parking lot. But everyone's cars were shot up. Cindy and Edward Romero, one of their cars had 8 bullet holes. The other car had 9 bullet holes through it. So they were literally trapped in their apartment. And at any given time, that was not just a one-off situation. At any given time, the Romeros would open their door and there'd be a man there with a gun. I mean, they were literally trapped in their apartment.
I mean, everyone's seen the video of like the wood and all
Yep.
the locks and all that stuff.
Yeah. They were going around with axes, chopping people's door handles off. I mean, so Vicente shows me this video footage, and I said, Vicente, why are you bringing this to me? And he said, you're the only one talking about it. You are the only one talking about it. And I said, Vicente, these people are going to get killed. And he said, I know. And I said, he and I talked about it, and he knew, even though he knew this was going to be probably the biggest story of his career, and it was,
Right.
he knew he couldn't release the video footage. It would have gotten people killed. So I said to him, Vicente, you see what I'm dealing with. The whole world is calling me a liar, calling me crazy,
Right.
saying I'm a racist, this, that, and the other. I said, give me some time. Please get me in contact with the Romeros. I'm going to get them out of there. And then you can release this video footage. So he and I made this agreement. He got me in touch with the Romeros. The end result, I found a place for them to go. We staged this. We hit a U-Haul truck. It was a whole big operation to get them out of there because they were scared that if the gang caught on, that they were going to try and move out. Well, they might hurt them, or who knows at that point. So we put this all together, and I went in there and got the Romeros out. Well, once the Romeros were out, that's when Vicente released that video footage. I never even had possession of that video footage. So that was a big misconception that the media really, that this was all for attention, and that was just a one-time thing. When you have Cindy Romero trying to tell the media they're storing at least 200 guns in that building right there. But of course that was all before the election. It was leading up to the election. So it just turned into political football.
Right.
It is really what happened. But at the end of the day, it didn't matter to me. I know I saved their lives. They know I saved their lives. And to this day, Cindy Romero and I, and Ed too, we love Ed, but Cindy and I have become so close. And that's everything that I've been through with all of that. That's all that matters to me. So, and I think that so much has come out now that any sane person knows the truth now about those apartment complexes.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think it's fairly obvious that, of course, not every illegal immigrant's like this crazy thing. There's a lot of good people, but that doesn't deny the fact that there are some bad people as well that are obviously, I mean, like you said, it's public knowledge now. We've seen the videos that were doing bad things, So.
Well, the saddest part about it is once there were no more Americans, they started preying on other migrants.
Right.
I mean, that's horrifying. Our government says we welcome all migrants. We welcome you with open arms, but you're doing nothing to protect them. Right. They're being extorted by this gang. They're being beaten and raped and sex trafficked and starved. I mean, horrifying. Now it's a lot quieter and a lot calmer now since President Trump has taken office and folks, these criminals are being deported, and these folks are a lot safer. But make no mistake of it, nobody was protecting the peaceful migrants. Nobody was protecting them.
Right.
The Democrats can say whatever they want to. Nobody was protecting them at all. And I witnessed it with my own two eyes.
What have you seen since then? Have you driven by those apartments recently, like over the past year? Obviously, I think Trump called it Operation Aurora at one point. Like, what's kind of, and then everyone's seen the videos of, I want to say ICE, like going to these different apartment complexes and, you know what I'm saying, scoping them out and whatever they were doing. yeah, what's like different now? Because obviously it's not as loud as it was.
That's right.
What
Well, that's right.
Yeah.
And I have had several constituents who live in homes near the area of these apartment complexes.
Yeah.
They have reached out and thanked me. And let me be clear that most of the folks that live in Northwest Aurora are Democrats, and they're thanking me. They are thanking me for telling the truth and not crumbling and not caving when just about anybody else probably would have.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest, I would be afraid to like report on some of that stuff.
Right.
Just knowing what comes with that, you know.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I'll tell you something. One night I was with my son. I took him to the movies. And this was just at Tower and Hamden, not Northwest Aurora.
Yeah.
And my son and I come walking out of the movie theater, and the police had given me a heads up that just about every Tren de Aragua gang member that was in the city knew who I was and knew what I looked like.
Right.
So I already had this, lingering over my shoulder. But my son and I, little 5-year-old, come walking out of the movie theater, and there's a group of Hispanics standing outside the doors, and I didn't think anything of it. I don't know at what point they recognized me, at what point they realized it was me. We had stopped. My son had to go to the restroom, so I took him to the restroom, and we come walking out, and they start yelling Venezuela at me.
Really?
Yeah. And I stopped, and I picked my son up, and I just stared at them for a second just to kind of see if they were gonna come at me, if they were, and they didn't, and it probably because I had my son with me.
Yeah.
But they shouted Venezuela at me the entire time I walked to my car. So I know the risks that I took, right? And how big, this became the biggest story, I think, in like modern times.
Right. And you probably were not expecting that at all. Oh, shit.
Not only was I not expecting it, the Romeros were not expecting it.
Right.
They're just regular people who were living paycheck to paycheck, just bombarded by the media. They were called liars. They were called racists. Their last name is Romero.
Yeah.
And I think that's what broke my heart more than anything, is that I signed up for this. I put myself in this position, running for public office, right? And at the end of the day, I'm still a human being. I still very much have emotions, and it hurts and it's hard. But for folks like the Romeros, who didn't sign up for anything like this,
right,
who literally were forced from their home, who had to live in fear, in terror.
Right.
If you go back and listen to interviews that Cindy has given, there were times they bartered for their lives by giving the gang members food. Who my heart really started to break for was the Romeros. They didn't sign up for this. And let me tell you, they were both lifelong registered Democrats. Cindy Romero, when she spoke at the Trump rally, when he came to Aurora on October 11th, she said that. She told the entire crowd that she was a lifelong registered Democrat that was voting for president. We no sooner had the Romeros moved out within a half hour that Vicente broke the story. And that video footage came out.
Yeah, so he was ready. He knew it was going to go.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. All of a sudden, it broke like wildfire.
Yeah.
I have every news station calling me. I have national media calling. I have everybody calling me. And
it's wild to deal with. I couldn't imagine.
It was wild.
Yeah.
It was wild. What I told Cindy, well, we're in it. We're in it. I will deal with the media. I will figure this out. Right now, we're going to focus on getting you moved in. And you need to calm down. You guys need to get calmed down. We need to get your cars fixed.
Out about the media.
Well, she was just devastated.
Yeah.
She loved her home. They lived in that apartment for 4 years. They loved it. She hadn't slept in months. they were kicking in people's doors. I mean, I mean,
Yeah.
it all finally hit her, and she was able to take a deep breath and just broke down.
Yeah.
So I told her, deal with the media. They are all going to ask for your contact information. I said, but I'll take the lead on this. I'll navigate this. And if I think it's someone that, you should talk to, then I'll let you know. And I just told her, you do not worry about the media at all right now. I'll deal with them. So, but it just continued to escalate and escalate. Mm-hmm. And then next thing I knew, I was on Fox News National. And then it escalates even more. This was August 28th that I moved the Romeros out.
Yeah.
It escalates even more. And I get a phone call. President Trump's coming to Aurora. Not only is President Trump coming to Aurora, he's going to have a rally, and he wants you and Cindy Romero to speak at it.
Mm. That's nerve-wracking.
What?
Yeah.
And what's interesting is if you go back, I think she's taken a lot of it down now, but Cindy Romero, up until about 4 months before I moved her out of the apartment complex, she was on Facebook every day. Trump.
Really?
She hated him.
Yeah.
Fast forward 6 months, she's speaking at the Trump rally, begging other Democrats to please vote for President Trump.
So pretty much like before she was affected by the illegal immigration and, well, I guess the gangs from that, she was like very blue or, supporter of Democrats. And then all of a sudden,
lifelong.
Once like stuff started happening to her like firsthand, she's seeing it, it's affecting her. It made her kind of realize.
And I think what really hit her too is when I moved her out and she saw the media calling me a liar and then inadvertently calling her a liar. And this is her lived experience. Right. This is her lived story, not mine. It's one thing to call me a liar. It's another thing to call the Romeros a liar, who lived through this torment. And it was Democrats, right? It was Democrats calling us liars. And I think that's when Cindy and Ed really were like, what is going on? And getting this phone call that President Trump is cut. I mean, this was so much for both of us to take in. Right. But I just told Cindy, I said,
because it probably wouldn't have been like on a normal year, probably, President's probably not calling you. But given it was before the election,
that's right.
Like, of course,
But Kamala could have come out here. She could have held a rally in Aurora and said, I want to speak with Cindy Romero. We never got that call. So you had a lifelong Democrat get up on stage at the Trump rally and say to 40,000 Trump supporters, I am a lifelong registered Democrat, and I am asking other Democrats to please join me and vote for President Trump. Mm-hmm. That's pretty powerful.
Right.
And that takes a lot of guts on her part, right? To get up at a Trump rally, or Trump supporters, and say that you are a lifelong registered Democrat. It's been a lot. I mean, it's been a lot, but fun. And I would say that where we're at now, the apartment complex remodeling on one of them has already started. I think the other properties are in negotiation for sale. Ultimately, they're all going to be remodeled. And like I said, talking to the constituency in that part of Aurora, I mean, they thank me. And they all tell me, I'm a Democrat. I'm a Democrat, Danielle. But thank you for being.
Yeah.
So I don't think that the Democrats realize they lost a lot of their own people
Right.
because of this, because of the broken immigration system.
Well, and you've seen it during the election, like just how much it swayed, right?
That's right.
It swayed a lot.
That's right.
A popular thing during that time from the other side was, oh, it's, the landlords,
Right.
the slumlords.
Mm-hmm.
What's your opinion on that take?
Well, I don't know that I have an opinion either way. CBZ management bought those properties in 2019 and 2020, and they bought them in as-is condition.
Yeah.
So they weren't in great condition to begin with. In pandemic hit for almost 2 years,
Yeah.
right? So now we're at the end of 2021, and in, I believe it was 2022, they did invest roughly $300,000 into remodeling the Dallas Street apartments, which is where the Romeros lived.
Right.
And I think their plan was to go property by property and get them remodeled. The Romeros apartment was so cute. Appliances, brand new flooring.
So that's probably why they were attached to it.
They loved it. They loved it there. So I have mixed feelings. I believe that the intentions of the landlord were good. Like I said, these three were all purchased in 2019 and 2020.
Mm-hmm.
The pandemic hit, brought everything to a screeching halt. So they weren't able to get their properties remodeled as quickly as they wanted to. Invested $300,000 into the Dallas Street apartments. Yeah. And I saw the Romero's apartment for myself. Cute apartment.
Right.
They loved it. So, I have mixed emotions because I also know that they called and asked for help. They reached out to our attorney general and asked for help. And then you have the residents calling and asking for help over and over and over, and nobody's addressing the situation. Right. The trash truck company, the trash truck company told the landlord, and this is when it really, yes. The trash truck driver was held at gunpoint.
Wow, I did not know that.
Yeah. So all that trash
of course
that was sitting, that's exactly right. Right. But the media was putting out all these photos of all this piled up trash and these slumlords and, this and that. And it's, I think, the truth lies in there somewhere. Mm-hmm. But if you talk to the Romeros, they loved their apartment. And the boiler, they said, the only time it was like a really big issue was the boiler went down and they didn't have hot water for roughly 2 days. Mm. But that 2 days, to replace an entire boiler system,
right,
to get it done in 48 hours, I would say the landlord acted pretty quickly on that, right. So, I think that the landlord was used as a scapegoat for a lot of it. Mm-hmm. I think also the landlord probably should have had an on-site property management company rather than trying to have family members manage the property. Yeah. My feelings lie somewhere in the middle of all of that, but I certainly don't blame the landlord for a transnational gang coming in and kicking in people's doors and taking over apartment complexes and beating up the staff, hospitalizing the staff, holding the staff at gunpoint, robbing the staff, and telling the staff, do not return to work. I don't blame the landlord for that at all.
Right. Okay. Obviously, you've been very vocal about Governor Polis. Mm-hmm. Have you guys talked at all? Would you sit down with him? Is there...
You know, I tried.
Yeah.
I made a public plea
Right.
for him to reach out to me and to sit down and talk to me. And he called the police on me. So
did the police like reach out to you?
Oh yeah.
They have
Yes. Yes. Yes, they did.
What they say, like.
Yes, they.
Because I remember you had other footage that hadn't been released yet.
That's right. I had a lot of footage.
Yeah. So
because I started going in undercover with a body camera, and I started interviewing these migrants that were being terrorized by the gang.
Right.
Right? And so that's why I say is the saddest part about this is everybody's saying, oh, we welcome the migrants. You are allowing them to be tortured and terrorized, and they're telling their stories, and I'm capturing it on video, and you don't care. Right here. He called the cops on me.
Yeah, I do remember that. Yeah.
I publicly pleaded for him.
Yeah.
You can't make this up.
Right.
I publicly pleaded for him. I interviewed a couple inside of one of the apartment complexes on a horrific incident that happened to them by this gang. And I caught it on my body camera. And I thought, this is so heinous. Maybe I can get the governor to reach out to me and show him this.
Right.
And finally get help for these people. Because that's mainly what I wanted.
Right.
Was help for these people. I didn't want the limelight. I didn't want all the media. I wanted help for these people. And so I made this public plea. I said, I have this video. I would really like for you to watch it. Please reach out to me. I would like to have a conversation. He called the cops on me.
Still haven't heard from him since or anything?
No. I don't believe I ever will.
Wow. But you met with Trump. You can't.
That's right.
You can't meet with him.
That's right.
That's crazy.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And my plea was, Governor, please put politics aside. Please.
Right, I do remember that.
Please watch this video that I have. Please reach out to me. And he called the cops.
That's crazy.
And I was in possession of video evidence of a crime that I was with police investigation.
Even though you've been very vocal about...
That's right.
Police. Yeah.
But the worst part about it is in that video, when I was interviewing this couple, there's 2 police officers standing there.
Yeah. Right. It's like...
But the interim police chief at the time was digging her heels in. There's nothing going on here. So I said to the governor...
I knew it would be a bad look, probably.
Right.
Yeah.
So my response to the governor was, okay, I'll release the video. And Governor, in this video, the police are in the video. So who should I have called?
Right.
Who was I withholding evidence from? Who should I have called?
You were with it.
That's exactly right.
Right.
And then it was crickets.
Yeah.
Crickets from the governor's office.
What about Mayor Mike Johnson? Have you had a chance to talk to him?
No.
Would you talk to him or anything?
I mean, I'll sit down and talk to anybody.
Yeah.
But at this point, they have proven that they will do anything they have to do to protect narrative and to protect the Democratic Party. But I will sit down and talk to anybody. You saw me go on the Brother Jeff show.
Right.
I will sit down and talk to anybody.
I respect that.
I made a public plea to the governor, and he called the cops on me. So...
Kyle Clark, that would be an interesting one. You and Kyle Clark. Don't worry about that.
Kyle Clark, he was at the Trump rally.
Right.
He will not come near me. But he will talk about me all day long.
Right. How difficult has it become, like, being a public figure in, like, the political sphere and do you feel like you kind of, is it hard helping a lot of people? And do you ever feel like you're, I don't know, like you don't have enough time? You know what I'm saying? Like, how do you handle it?
Yeah, I mean, there's days where I definitely just have to withdraw
Mm-hmm.
for a while, and I have to recluse, and I have to just really spend time with my son, spend time with my family, go out paddleboarding, go do the things I love to do, and kind of check out.
Yeah.
You have to keep that balance, otherwise politics will eat you alive.
Right.
I mean, I say to people that politics is a full contact sport, and you can very easily lose yourself.
Right. And I mean, I'm sure like everyone recognized you, walk around. Westward said you were the face of Aurora.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so I can't.
Well, they said I was one of the people to watch in 2025.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I never, like I said, I got into politics because police officers asked me to,
Mm-hmm.
and I was an angry bar owner, right? So fast forward to where I am today, and have since had meetings with people like Tom Homan and President Trump and numerous congressional leaders. It's pretty surreal. I think I'm still very grounded. I think I'm still very involved in my community. I think I'm still very humble. Like I say, to this day, I'm willing to talk to anybody. I don't by any means think I'm better than anybody. I don't agree with Democrats at this point. I don't think that the Democratic Party that has ever been known in the history of this country exists anymore. I think the activists have taken it over. With that being said, I'm willing to sit down and talk to anybody. I don't think I'm better than anybody. I think I'm a very humble, normal individual, raising my kid, going to the gym, running businesses, and trying to do the best I can to help my hometown and protect people.
Yeah.
That's what I care about.
Diving into like that show a little bit as you going on to Brother Jeff. I don't want to get too deep in that because I feel like it's already been talked about. You said what you had to say on it, but like, how was that experience? And like, as far as some of the, I guess, the criticism of the people in the comments and stuff like that, what would be your response? I think the main one, everyone was like, "Oh, humanize." When you said humanize, like, if you just want to maybe break that down, what you meant by that a little bit for the people.
Sure.
And
well, the good news is that Brother Jeff already broke that down for me. And he said, when you don't know somebody and you only read about them in the media, or you only read Facebook comments about them, or you judge them by who they associate with, right? And then all of a sudden you come face to face with this person and you have a conversation with this person, all of a sudden, they're a totally different person to you. And so when I had him just sort of lumped in with this group, of activists and people who just hate me, and, he's already written me off, and, all of these things, I saw this humble human side of him, not this image of him pandering to just his audience, right? I saw him in a different light. Yeah, which makes sense. And I thought, wow, he's pretty cool. Right. And like I said, I kind of feel bad for him in several ways, because I think he has the ability to help. He helps so many people, but I think he has the ability to expand his reach, to help more people, and to really, really make a huge name for himself. But I think he's held back and bound, almost beholden to these activists. And I think that's sad, because he is a cool guy. he and I had a great conversation.
Right.
And, you know, he and I talked after the show, and he checked on me, you know, and I checked on him because his own followers were attacking him for not attacking me.
Yeah.
When he said, you know, I had someone on the show and we were able to have a conversation.
Right.
Why does everything have to be an attack? It doesn't have to be.
Right.
He was attacked, you know, by his own followers. I see him in a totally different light. I see him just as a regular human being.
Mm-hmm.
Again, and he's the one who explained it. Before you truly get to have a conversation with someone, before you truly know someone, you may have a preconceived notion of them. That's totally incorrect.
Right.
And
I mean, I'm sure a lot of people humanize you in that way.
After they sit down and talk, that's right.
They see you as this political figure, you know, very outspoken, and then they talk to you, and you're like, oh, she's just a regular human.
That's exactly right.
Okay, yeah. That's
exactly right. She's just a regular human being, like, living her life.
I think this whole conversation, you've been very vocal, like, it's never been about the fame, which I agree with. But I feel like when you get that fame, like, people don't treat you like a human. They think they can just say whatever and on the internet and talk whatever, and I'm never going to run into this person in life. And then you run into them, and it's like... Right. It's like, oh, you're actually kind of cool. Like...
Yeah, that's right. When you take the media out of it, when you take social media out of it, you know, when you take the haters out of it, that's why I'm saying I'm willing to sit down and talk to anybody.
Yeah.
And I had a humongous respect for Brother Jeff. Because let's be honest, I called him out.
Right.
And he responded by calling me out.
Right. Yeah.
And saying, then sit down and have a conversation with me.
Mm-hmm.
Checkmate.
Right.
Tell me when and where. I'll be there. I can't not show up at that point. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I showed up. His followers said I wouldn't even show up. They said I wouldn't even, there's no way she's coming to 5 Points. But I showed up. And I left with a newfound respect for him, and what he's trying to do in the community, and you know, the help that he is trying to provide for people. Like I said, I just think it's sad that so many of his followers only care about one narrative. And it's almost like he has to be beholden to that, or he'll lose his following. And I watched him get attacked. He was attacked.
Right.
You know, so very sad. But I have a great respect for him. I would go on his show again. I'm willing to talk to anybody, but only very few people, I would say, on the other side of the political aisle are willing to sit down and talk to me.
Yeah. I think one of the criticisms about that video was people were like, oh, I wish you would have, like you said, he didn't necessarily go like hard at you, I guess, or hard enough, but also that you just, I guess, didn't leave with like grace or something like that. I don't know. I feel like it was a pretty respectful conversation. So.
Well, they're mad that I didn't give in to saying that Kylan Lewis was unjustly murdered by the Aurora Police Department, and that's what they're mad about. But again, that went through a grand jury. And I said on his show, if you feel like there's, I mean, the criminal element of it is over. He was cleared all the way through a grand jury. Yeah. But like I said on the show, if they still feel like the city is liable for the death of Kylan Lewis, then file your lawsuit. But guess what happened after I went on that show? They've now filed their lawsuit. So let the courts decide. Let it go through the justice system. You want justice. You filed your lawsuit, which is what I asked them to do on that show. They have filed a lawsuit. So let it play out. And we'll find out.
The Aurora movie theater shit is so old, but I mean, do you remember where you were at when that happened?
Yeah, I was at home. I owned a house. I was in the military, so I owned a house right outside of Buckley.
Yeah.
The Mississippi Gate. I had a house right, and I was home that night. I was woken up, obviously because this was the midnight showing.
Right.
I was woken up by all of the sirens. So
you were pretty close-ish.
very close. I was at, I mean, I lived pretty much at Mississippi and where it turns into Alameda.
And then, so you're running for city council again. What are like some important dates as far as voting, and maybe some, things you want to touch on really quick about that, and what's important to you, ballots, stuff, things like that.
Sure. Well, election day this year is November 4th.
Okay.
Ballots will be mailed out roughly the second week of October. I would encourage all people in Aurora to double check their voting registration, make sure their address is up to date, and they haven't been listed as inactive, because if you've been listed as an inactive voter, you won't get a ballot mailed to you in most cases. But that, I mean, election day is it's the Super Bowl of the election, so we'll see what happens on November 4th.
Okay. And then, since it is a hip-hop show, I do want to ask, I know we brought up Kevin Gates, but if you can only listen to like a couple of hip-hop artists on a road trip real quick, who would that be? Like 2 or 3, 4?
It would be Kevin Gates for sure.
Okay.
And then, I mean, I don't know. There's a lot. There's Fetty Wap. I like. I mean, we can put my Spotify.
Yeah, that's fine. That's probably the easiest way to do it.
I'll tell ya. Yeah, Fetty Wap's a big one. Kevin Gates for sure. K Camp. And then there's like some songs that I like from, but like just like one hits here and there from people. I like Lil Wayne a lot.
So don't be surprised if you're driving around Aurora and you see Kevin Gates.
It's a fact.
Yeah.
I mean, you can look at my whole.
Yeah.
It's a fact. Yeah. I mean, that's pretty much. But then there's like some one-offs from people that I like. I really like Soak City, that song, but that's just that song that I like from the artist.
Yeah. Okay. Are there any Colorado artists you listen to or support?
Terrell Matheny. He and I grew up together. Trev Rich, I've heard, some of his music, and I think he's doing a lot of good stuff. Nakira Rivera, her and I grew up together, went to Overland High School together. Other than that, that's pretty much it.
Okay. What do you have any like long-term goals, any future things for the people to be on the lookout for?
Well, I mean, I'm running to retain my seat this year, and so that's my focus right now. Beyond that, I just kind of wherever I end up. This is a tough state as a Republican, right? To really get anywhere until mindsets start to change, but I do think that people are starting to see for themselves that not all Republicans are what Democrats make us out to be, and I think that Republicans' messaging is resonating more with people than Democrats' messaging.
Do you want to, I guess, keep growing, elevating your political career, maybe getting, maybe look at mayor position?
I haven't ruled it out, but I'm not totally sold on it either. Okay. I love this city, and right now I just really want to win re-election in Aurora.
Okay. Obviously, the bar, JJ's, right? People can go there and get some drinks, or you guys serve food and stuff.
It's a huge sports bar.
Okay, cool. Where's that located for the people?
It's at 2340 South Chambers Road, JJ's place.
Okay. And I think that just about does it. Where can people find you on? Maybe a website, social media, anything like that?
Sure, I'm
Last
on
minute
every
shout-outs.
social media platform. You can find me, but my website is danielleforaurora.com, and it's FOR, danielleforaurora.com, and you can go on, you can email me, you can sign up for my newsletter, you can follow me. All of my social media links are on my website, so that would be the best way to find me.
Okay, perfect. Make sure y'all hit that like button, comment down below your favorite part of this interview, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell button to stay notified when all the latest news drops. Make sure y'all go follow Danielle Jurinsky on everything. All the links to her social media accounts will be in the description. Make sure y'all get out and vote. And I think that just about does it.
Huge shout out for Mile High Minute for taking the time to come interview me.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. Mile High Mint, #1 blog in the universe. We out.